Good afternoon. This session is on leadership and development. I'll let you gentlemen take a seat. So I've had the pleasure of working with Pam Gardiol, who is the president of Gardiol and Associates. She works in consulting the demographic of Seattle and does quite a bit of consulting for UDOT. She's been doing this for the past 8 years. She teaches at the University of Utah and has a political science in the political science department and continuing education. Please help me welcome Pam Gardiol.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's nice to be with you today. We are few, but we have the quality here, right? Okay, we are talking about the concept of leadership, and any minute now there is a handout that will be swooping through the door for each of you. Okay, and the camera, and I do tend to wander, but I've already warned Kirby of the fact. Okay, so leadership. All of us understand the concept. All of us have had good leaders. All of us have had leaders that have not brought out the best in us. And where I'd like to start is to ask you, let's see, maybe could those of you on this side, I'm sorry to ask you to move. I know you've just established your natural habitat, your space, but I'm going to invite you, if you would, on this side to come closer together so that you can chat with each other. And let's have, Liz, you're going to stay with us, so maybe we could have, if you'd please, Travis join the ladies here, and then if we could have, I'm sorry to make you move off the back row. If you'd join this group right here. Thank you. And then as others come, hopefully they'll cluster with you. Probably not. I'll probably have to be the shepherd all the way, okay? Thank you for moving. I appreciate that. Okay, so here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I would like you to discuss two things. One is the worst leader you have ever had. Sorry to make you go there, but I'm sure it was long ago, right? The worst leader you ever had, and what I'd like you to do is describe what was it that that leader did that made it such a negative experience. I'm going to start there, and then I'll tell you about the second thing I'd like you to do. So I'm going to give you 5-6 minutes to recollect this poor leader. All right? So go ahead and chat.
Which was fine because I mean, he would party a lot. He always come in as basic training went on. He always thought outrun us, never getting better. So and I started with this that same with my mom for their expectations, and I don't even know what those expectations are. You know, like at a family gathering or something, right? And then they don't happen and you're not happy. Well, you never gave us a chance to. I mean, I haven't done that. I know.
I'll do the dishes.
Yeah, I had expectations.
Oh, that's my boss right now, every one of them.
Thank you.
These are half of them. They're still printing the rest, but she wanted to get a stack too.
Well, as you can see, we don't have a lot of folks, so I think we're good. Thank you.
She's still printing.
Okay, so I'm sorry to interrupt, but let's go ahead and debrief. What were the characteristics of this worst leader you ever had? Well, share with us something you were just discussing. I can quiet a group faster than anyone I know. Please.
Non-trusting, someone that you just can't trust.
Okay, so no trust. Now, you couldn't trust them. Did they demonstrate that they trusted you? Or was it a mutual mistrust?
I think it becomes a mutual because since they trust no one, you begin to fear trusting them.
Okay, so you fear trusting them because you don't know if they have your back. You don't know what's going to happen next. All right, thank you. Let's come to this group, please. What were some of the things you discussed? What were they doing? Was it a do as I say, not as I do kind of situation?
Yeah, I think it was that, and then there wasn't any, they didn't really care about their employees, or in this case, I was in the military, they didn't care.
So how did they see you if they didn't care?
For him, they saw him as he was an idiot, they didn't care about what he was doing. I mean, he would do what he did, and we would do it, but we didn't care for him, just like he didn't care for us.
So how, did he see you as a means to his end? Did he see you as objects? How did he see you? How did you perceive that he saw you?
Just as objects, I mean, he
Okay.
didn't really, take the pride in actually building us up and actually getting us to be where we need to be in something. I mean, I think that's kind of the goal of a leader. Your employees, you're training them to take over your position, and you should have some sort of self-worth in that. You should see that it's great to see your employees grow.
So there was no pride in building you up. What I'm hearing you say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was that it was more about his needs rather than understanding he was there to take care of your needs in alignment with the performance expectations. Right, thank you. Let's come to this group. What were some of the characteristics you described? So they micromanaged and then were critical and found fault, right? Found fault. Well, that certainly is a way to build you up. And please. So there was a moving target? Or there wasn't even a target. No target. What else did you describe? Let's come back up to this group again. What was one other thing that you identified with this worst leader? I'm sorry? Oh, so he handed off his work? And of course, we know that an organization, the human body, a community, the universe are all a system. And a system is a collection of interdependent parts, all of which are necessary in order for the system to accomplish its purpose. All parts are interdependent. It does not mean that one part of a system doesn't have to do its part. All parts are critical, and so the fact that this leader, manager handed off the work only hampered the system's ability to be effective. Any other characteristics that you described? Please. Oh, say more. Right, and we know that leadership, as has been mentioned, is about focusing on two things. One is the purpose of the organization, And secondly, about creating the competencies and confidence within the individuals within that system to collectively accomplish what it is we're about. Thank you for adding that. Any other characteristics we should write up here? Please.
When I was a young boy,
That was only 5 years ago.
5 years ago,
Yeah.
forget,
Oh, no.
my stepfather that my mother remarried, I was down in the field with him and we were fishing cattle. And everything went wrong. And he cussed me out all day long. And we got through with the day, at the very end of the day, as we were riding home, he says, "Oh, forget what I said," because he knew he was gonna beat my mom. And he says, "Just don't pay attention. You're really a good boy. I was really proud of the way you did for me." And I thought to myself, you know, one thing about the morning, I believed what you were saying. Today I'm going to do just fine.
Okay, so that lack of authenticity and respect and incongruity.
Himself is all it seemed like he was doing.
Okay, he was what of himself?
He was my stepfather.
Okay, so he was venting and also trying to justify his behavior by covering it over, but had created a fear-based environment so that you didn't trust him at all. You know, there's the phrase, "Your actions speak so loudly, I can't hear a word you're saying." Yeah, so we know that leaders must be consistent in alignment with what it means to be a leader. Any other comments we want to add? Please.
My example that I gave was I worked with a boss who didn't manage at all. He just sat in his office and did what he wanted to do. And he and I would sit on a project together, and he couldn't do his piece, and I couldn't do my piece. But I got all the blame, and he didn't stand up and let me know that he needed to do his part.
So they were absent and then gave you the blame for anything that happened rather than accepting responsibility and ownership of supporting you to accomplish the goal. All right, so we've had an opportunity then to look at the worst leader. What I'd like to invite you to do in your same new best friend group is identify what were the characteristics, or perhaps you have the best leader now, what were the characteristics of the most effective, valuable, impressive leader that you have ever had. So I'll let you go ahead and discuss that. And if we could invite you, let's see, sir, would you join this group? Ma'am, would you join the front group? Because it looks like this gentleman has navigated naturally to this group. You're leaving. Was it something we said? No. Okay. All right. Characteristics of the best leader. Okay.
I didn't hear the 5-year limit. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. is very quiet over here. Okay, so let's go ahead and debrief this. Let's look at the more positive. Let's talk about the characteristics that you've just identified in this amazing leader. What were some of the things that you said? Let's come to this group. We'll go this way this time.
I think a leader who is the last thing I mentioned was that's willing to let you learn. In other words, willing to let you fail to learn in some cases.
So we know that, I can't think right and spell at the same time. I think that is an N. That learning means that we have to fail. And so that leader makes it safe to fail. I recently read, excuse me, a very interesting book by Catherine Schultz. The title is Being Wrong. And what the takeaways from the book, there's lots of them, but I think the takeaways that are relevant to our discussion today are, first of all, that as humans we are wrong more frequently than we are right. Is it? Well, you can say that she's human also, and so it goes both ways. That we as humans are wrong more frequently than we are right. Secondly, that in our society, we deem being wrong a character flaw. Would you agree, disagree with that? That we deem being wrong a character flaw. What happens in organizations when mistakes are made? Often what we do is we look around until we find a who, we blame the who, and try to figure out what to do to fix that person, rather than understanding systems, etc. Okay, so concept number one, we are wrong more frequently than we are right. Number two, in our society, we deem being wrong a character flaw. Concept number three, we only learn when we are wrong. Because if we believe that we are right, we are not open to what's ever going on in our environment that is changing our understanding of what it is we're doing. You're all familiar with the phrase, the more I know I don't know. I hate that. That there's always so much more to learn. We also know that the basic law of the universe, I hate this too, the basic law of the universe is change. And if you like or you don't like what's happening at this moment, just wait, because it will change. Therefore, as human beings, inherent in being part of the universe is that we will constantly be evolving and changing, as will the organization, and all of the factors that exist in the organization to which we must respond. We know that as we leave this room just in this brief hour and a half, that at a molecular level, we are a different person from the one who walked in here. That change is just happening everywhere. And so this leader let you learn and fail. You remind me of an example, if I may. Years ago, I had the pleasure of working at Weber State in continuing education. And the dean was a wise, effective leader. He'd been there a long time and had learned what it meant to lead rather than manage, rather than micromanage. And he very much deliberately, proactively encouraged ownership by everyone in the organization. Now, one of the things that happened when new members joined the unit was that they were a little hesitant that they would make a mistake. And he would say to them, usually in the first staff meeting they attended, "This is Kaveh, we're really glad to have him here. He has a background of X, Y, and Z that's directly related to what it is we're doing. He will be taking over the whatever, whatever. All of you take a chance to get to know him, because there's a lot of us, there's only one of him. Let him know how you will be a resource to him in what it is he is doing." And then the dean would say to Kaveh, our new person, I am a resource for you as well, and I can't wait for you to make your first mistake. Now, all the rest of the staff knew exactly what he was talking about, and we would roll our eyes. But Kaveh, the new person, had no idea, and he would think, maybe coming to work here is my first mistake. Right? And so invariably, right, Kaveh was busy doing his thing, and being human, would make a mistake and would go with some fear and trepidation to the dean's office. The dean would ask 3 questions. Question number 1, what do you need from me in order to solve the problem? Not, well, let me tell you what you should do. Not, get out of the way, I will take it from here. What do you need from me in order to solve the problem? I am a resource for you and a sounding board, and so use the resource that I represent. So they would resolve whatever it was, however long that took. The second question the dean would ask is, if you had to do it again, what would you do differently? Not, well, let me tell you what you should have done, but rather he knew to facilitate the critical thinking of Kaveh so that Kaveh could walk through the process, do that critical thinking, and also the dean was able to tell where were the holes. Where did the dean need to direct Kaveh, send him, or have other people come help him? How did he support him in the process of learning? The third question was, what have you learned? Now, question number 2 and question number 3 sound similar, but they are very different. Because question number 3 was that he wanted the new employee to learn that if he or she made a mistake, the safest and first place to go was to the leader. I am here to help you. I don't want you to feel that it is not safe to make a mistake. If you're going to make one, if you think you're hesitant, come to me and we'll figure out how best to facilitate your ownership. As a result of that leadership style, he created a nationally recognized award-winning unit, to the point that people would walk into the dean's office and say, Richard, you're going to President's Council, wherever you're going, whatever that was, and what I need you to bring me back is X. Here's your assignment, and I need it by next Tuesday. The dean said, I don't know anything about what's going on around here. I used to tell him, you lie. I don't know anything that's going on around here. But what he did know was exactly how to connect with every single employee. He might walk into someone's office and say, you know, how's that plumbing problem you had at the house? Did you get that resolved? So there was that sense of relationship with each employee. And secondly, then, people would say, I'm glad you're here because I want to bounce something off of you related to the work that I am doing, that rapport, that trust, that ability to feel safe so that learning and failing were not seen as fatal. In fact, Jim Collins, about 15 years ago, I'm sure some of you have read Good to Great. And in that book, he talks about, well, first of all, just as a quick review, it was research into the creme de la creme, the very best organizations in all kinds of fields. And he wanted to know what was it that made them so good. And primarily, it was a level 5 leader. And a level 5 leader was someone who conducted what they referred to as autopsies without blame. If there's a mistake, if something didn't work, we are not looking for a person. We are looking to learn from the experience and ask, how did our process fail? What was the root cause of the problem? And in 90% of the cases, it was not, in fact, even more, it was not an individual. It was the environment in which the individual functioned. Which brings me to another point related to let let you learn and fail, and that is leaders understand that people can only perform within the constraints of the environment in which they exist. People, any other kind of organism in the universe, can only perform within the constraints of the environment. So leaders understand that the way in which we look at and adapt those constraints is to actively involve the people who are responsible to do the work. Who knows best what's getting in their way of performing to the standard that we're asking them to perform to? All right, I babbled a whole bunch. Let's come over here, please. Yes, and so what I'm hearing you say, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but good leaders know how to engage those frontline folks or whoever is responsible for the work rather than assuming that they know the answers. Okay, so they give voice to those who will be responsible for the work. Okay, let me take you back to the dean one more time in regards to that. So after Kaveh got used to the fact that the dean really was a resource, Kaveh might still have been concerned about doing the work successfully. And so the dean gave this advice, which I think is valuable to any leader. And that was, he said to Kaveh, okay, you're in charge. What I want you to do before you make your decision is do due diligence. Do whatever research, talk to whomever you need to talk to make sure that you understand the scope of whatever it's going to take in order to make that decision. When you have decided to make your decision, ask yourself this question. If I move in this direction, if I make this decision, if I implement this action, and worst seen scenario happens, ask yourself, will the university still be here? If the answer is no, don't do it. But if the answer is yes, and you've done your due diligence, go for it. If it falls apart, come see me, and we'll figure out what to do. Now, can you see how that fosters ownership of not only the responsibility, but also the scope of understanding the implications of what's being done? Okay, so that sense of voice and ownership are key. Thank you. Let's come up here. What was a characteristic of best practice leadership that you discussed? Okay. Say more. Okay. So you know that they are behind you. Very good. Thank you. Let's come back over here. What was another characteristic you identified? It was so profound. We're just thinking about it.
I would say a challenge, a good leader shouldn't just make you comfortable all the time, but should push you to do greater, perhaps than even you believe you can do on your own.
So outside of comfort. So give us an example of how that works. I hate that part when you throw me outside my comfort zone, but the universe does it every day, doesn't it? Give us an example.
Well, I can maybe think of one off the top of my head. Before coming to UW, I was overseeing a procurement team, and I was given a challenge to hit a certain cost savings target within the organization. It had never been done before. And so initially, my initial thought is I can't do it, it's impossible, it'll never happen.
and the reinforcement of that challenge. All right, thank you. That going outside our comfort level, again, the basic law of the universe is change. And so what we're looking to create are organizations that are change hardy. That change is what we embrace. Moving and growing is inherent. And I know here at UDOT you do an amazing job of that. Let's come over here. One other best practice characteristic of leadership. Give us an example, please.
You're learning as you're going, and again, you pushed outside of your comfort zone. And a good leader is going to be patient with you and help build you to exceed the expectations that are required.
Okay, so that patience doesn't mean that they just check back in 6 months. Patience means mentoring, doesn't it? It means debriefing, what's working, what's not working. What have you learned? What do we do next? So that patience means two things. One, that they have an eye on your potential and helping you reach it. And secondly, they have an eye on the goal. What is it collectively for you and the organization that we're trying to accomplish? Thank you. One more thing from this group.
I think encouragement and compliments, letting you know that you have done a good job.
Okay, so feedback, compliments, okay, may I talk about constructive criticism for a moment? My bias is that constructive criticism is in the eye of the receiver. May I pick on you, Kirby? Yeah, well, here you are in this room. I just want to give you some feedback on your performance. What's your reaction when I say that?
Bring it on.
Bring it on, he says. Is there any taking a deep breath to find out what's coming? Okay. So I just have a little feedback for you. Yeah. What does it mean, right? So I would pose that constructive feedback is a euphemism, because if what I provide to you, you don't see as valuable but critical, your reaction is this. Thank you for joining us. Our groups are getting larger one by one. This is definitely our largest group, okay? Would you agree or disagree with that? That constructive feedback depends on who's receiving it. Say more. I can see the wheels turning, please. Yes, yes, yes. Gary, thank you. So feedback is, excuse me, we'll be right back. I babble all the time, please.
Makes me think of a boss I had. He was the owner and founder of the company.
Highly vested in the company, yeah.
Right? And an older fellow that had seen the world, and he would just walk down the halls on a Saturday or some afternoon and just walk in your office and say, "What are you working on today?" And I remember hearing some people say how much that irritated them, but I remember thinking how awesome it was that he cared. I mean, he came and he wasn't there to rip anybody or ridicule anybody. He was honestly concerned about what you were doing and wanted to see if he could help you.
It was in the eyes of the beholder. Okay, so had he come in and said, how are things going? Any way I can help you? Do you think that could have lessened the angst? Or would that still have been angst creating?
I don't know, I'm probably too judgmental. The guys that weren't doing anything probably were nervous.
Oh, okay, well, you know. Okay, please.
Constructive criticism and finding solutions. So to me, when you say constructive criticism, that's just a way to blame you nicely that you're doing something wrong. You know, you're trying to package it so you're not offended, but you're still comfortable that you're doing something wrong. Versus, okay, here's a problem, now what's the solution? To me, that would be really something that's helpful to that person, not just saying, well, you did this wrong. But I'm okay, you know, it's like, you know, you're not fired, but, you know, do you see the difference of trying to make them feel, know that they did something wrong versus, hey, this went wrong, but how do we fix it?
Okay, so it's a collaborative experience. What we always have to remember as leaders in any of our interactions with colleagues is what do we want the outcome to be? And the outcome that we want is competent, confident people who own their performance. They are better capable as a result of the dynamic of debriefing whatever was working, not working. Please.
I think that just with my experience of being a supervisor over the years,
Can everybody hear?
I think you need to know your audience, and in giving constructive criticism, you're obviously not going to approach certain subject matters like a bull in a china hut. And I'm going to approach something with my 14-year-old talking about his grades a whole lot different than I would maybe a worker or somebody that I'm going to have to discuss. And approach is everything. I mean, and truly the way, and I'm not saying approach it so at the end you can slam them into oblivion and make them feel less than what we started out with, but making it so on the end it's still positive. Even if you're reprimanding, how you approach that is everything. Totally everything.
So what I heard you just say then is respect for the individual is critical. So let's consider that amazing leader you had. And the question that I ask you is, would you say that that leader was comfortable in his or her own skin? And that the focus then was clearly on the performance standard, the goals of what we're trying to accomplish. But it wasn't about them. It wasn't about what they needed. They saw themselves truly as the facilitator of growth and development of you. Would you agree, disagree with that? Okay. So the question that I ask for us then is, how comfortable are we in our own skin when it comes to our sphere of influence, our sphere of responsibility, and those things for which we are accountable to accomplish through the work of a collective group of individuals? Do we model these things? And if we do, congratulations, are there opportunities for us to become more effective in doing these things? And secondly, and I think something that's critical is, we may believe that we are doing these things. Unfortunately, it is not our opinion that matters. How are we being perceived? Because leaders are followed by choice. Not ours as the leader, but the follower. Would you say, rhetorical question, that those whom you lead choose to follow you because they respect you, they see these things in you, or do we believe that we're doing these things when in fact we are perceived differently? I recently was working with a small organization and actually interviewing every single person in this organization. There was a lot of pain that was going on there, and it turned out that I interviewed the plant manager last. I had interviewed everyone else, and so I had a bank of questions. I asked every person the exact same questions for consistency. And one of the questions is, talk to me about the culture here and define leadership for me. their perception, consistently, their perception of the plant manager was 180 degrees from his. Okay? Now, so you could see why there was a disconnect, why there was pain, because these characteristics, even though he believed he was demonstrating them, the evidence said, mm-mm, mm-mm. So what do leaders do? They connect frequently with their followers to ensure that there is a sense of mutual respect. Doesn't mean that Kaveh is always going to perform to standard, but if you want him to perform more effectively, that sense of relationship in relation with the performance standards is necessary. I am not saying in any way, shape, or form that the performance standard is allowed to slide. No, but what we're trying to do is foster that sense of ownership within the individuals. And some individuals have a harder time of getting that than others, as you've described. Any other comments? Anything else we'd like to add to our list? Please.
A lot of that with feedback to employees is listening to what they have to say back to you, because they'll give you some constructive feedback as well. So I had one where the outcome wasn't what I expected, and they told me, well, I didn't understand that. If you would have communicated that with me, I would have done everything else. So that's what I really respectful about communicating to them what's expected of them.
So sometimes, leaders, the kind that we're describing in this second scenario, are the ones who can create an environment where people can say, that is the ugliest baby I ever saw. And your response is, what is your recommendation? Because there is that mutual sense of problem solving to ensure that we get there together. Here's what I need from you in order to be successful. How accessible are we to those whom we lead? How do we create those dynamics where we go to problem solving? What do you need from me in order to be successful? That sense of ownership. Thank you for sharing that. Anything else, please?
You just called it an environment, I think, because every individual is different. I think I'd almost define it as a relationship.
Absolutely.
There can be an environment, hey, we have an open door policy, come and talk to me anytime you want, whatever, but depending on the relationship you have with that individual, that environment might be different. Might have to be different for one person on your team than it is for somebody else. And so I don't want to supersede Liz here, because she said everything comes down to, what was it? No, what did you say, Liz? It's all about what? Approach. It's all about approach. I'm going to say it's all about relationship, which I think takes into approach, and I also think it takes in environment.
So I didn't have room to put it at the top, so we can say it is the overarching element of leadership, or we could put it down here and say it is the foundation. Everything is accomplished. Everything is accomplished or not accomplished based on the caliber of relationship we have with the individual. I would pose, correct me if I'm wrong, that if we go back, I didn't put it on the wall, Liz, it's right up here. I understand we cannot put flip charts on the wall, that there wasn't a relationship here, right? We went through the motions, we did what we needed to do, but there was not that sense of fluid communication, trust, openness, those things that create synergy and dynamics to expand not only the capability of the organization to succeed, but the ownership of each individual in order to make that success happen. I would pose over here, there is a relationship. Would you agree, disagree? Okay, so now that you have the handout, thank you, Liz. Let's look on that handout. Does everyone have one? Do you have one, ma'am? Have we got a deal for you? And I'm going to invite you, if you would, Liz. He just gave her one. Yeah, to join up here. We need folks in groups together. Okay, so look at this. I've got leadership goals. Now, I've already referred to create competent, confident people who own their performance. Competent. They have the knowledge, the skills, the ability they need in order to do their job. How do they get them? Well, training is one element. Mentoring is another one. Working collaboratively with folks doing the kinds of things that they do, all of those things expand the competency of individuals. Another thing that is critical, and I know that you do it here, and those are referred to as after-action reviews. After a project is done, and you do some pretty phenomenal projects, there is an after-action review. What worked? What didn't work? What would we do differently? What are recommendations for moving forward? All of those create what's referred to as a learning organization, where people learn from each other on how to be more successful. Confident people function in a non-fear-based environment. When there's a mistake, we say, how did our process fail? What have we learned? What will we do differently moving forward? And then the last one on this line is performance ownership. What are the ways in which you facilitate your direct reports, your colleagues, in looking at the context in which they do their work and looking for ways to do it more effectively? Okay, so we know that that's one of the leader's goals, is what is on that first line. Look at the second line, to create a culture of possibility, not constraints. You've all heard the phrase, we've always done it this way, or no, you can't do it that way because we never have, or whatever it may be. What we are doing is thinking about what is the future, what options, what possibilities could we implement. Now, sometimes people are so socialized to work within the constraints that it is difficult for them to think outside of those constraints. So what we say is, all right, I'm going to give you the magic wand, I'm going to give you all power, all budget, whatever it may be. This is hypothetical, of course. And what could we do if there were no constraints? Invariably, takes a while to get people to start thinking outside of the constraints. But once they do, it's interesting what they begin to come up with. Now, will you be able to implement all of those things? Probably not. But do they serve as the opportunity to do things differently? Absolutely. Any comments? Okay. Third is develop individuals who are self-influencing. What does it mean to be self-influencing? Say that again, please. We want to excel at the job, yes, and we are a fortunate organization when we have every, excuse me, it chokes me up just thinking about it. When we have an organization full of self-influencing individuals who see the mission, see the goals, and work to make them happen. Thank you. Who demonstrate self-direction and self-motivation. Let me give you this quote regarding motivation. This comes from Dr. Peter Schultes. He says, "It is the ultimate management conceit to believe that we can motivate another person. Motivation is not some substance that can be infused from the outside like a bone marrow transplant." Would you agree with Dr. Schultes? Disagree? You're nodding. Say more, please.
I do agree. It has to come from within, and you have to find what motivates each individual and use that, or help them find that, I guess is maybe a better way to create the environment for them to use that motivation to do their best.
And so what I'm hearing you describe are what are referred to as intrinsic motivators. Here they are. These are the things that create that environment of value, that I want to be motivated, that I want to contribute what I do, that we learn in a safe environment, that we have a voice, that I know that you support me in what I do, that I have the opportunity to grow even if it means I have to go outside of my comfort level, because I know you are there to help me. That you have patience and mentor and help me grow. That there are ways in which I can gain feedback and monitor my performance, and I know that you will help me celebrate. That you also help me find solutions rather than blame me. That you know who I am as a person. Doesn't mean you're coming over for dinner every Friday night, but you know me authentically, and I respect that. I also know that you respect me and what I can bring to the organization. You listen to me, and all of these things then create that relationship. Now, get out of the way because I want to perform. I would pose there's one more thing, and that is that regarding these challenges for growth, I know what the goal is. What is it we're working on, and what is my part in it? Now, look at the third small bullet there that says that developing individuals who perform within a system-related job. This morning I was with a group and I asked them, can you tell me what the mission of your organization is? Not one of them could. So let me ask you, what is your mission? Keep Utah moving. And so it means then that for every single employee, there is a direct line of sight between what they do and that. And then there is the discussion of how that happens. Okay, so we know that we have a mission, and you'll notice I've given you a bullet that says there is a social system and a technical system. The technical system is the way in which we do what we do. The building the bridges, the doing the accounting, the whatever it may be, the technical component. But there is also a social system, because organizations are made up of people, and the way in which they interact with each other determines how well they are focused on what we want them to do and that which diverts their attention. And I don't know about you, but I find that sometimes a leader spends more time on the social system than on the technical system. Would you agree or disagree with that? Okay, so we talked a little bit about this environment of value and self-directed, self-motivated. So I'd like to show you just a brief clip from an individual named Daniel Pink. Perhaps some of you have heard of him. Perhaps some of you are aware of his work. But he talks about what are those intrinsic things that engage people in doing their work and in following us. And so let's watch this clip, and thanks to Kirby, as soon as I get rid of this housekeeping stuff here, for making sure that we have sound, because for a while we didn't, if you'll forgive me. I'm sorry? Yes, well, this thing is going to pop up again, so if you'll forgive me for just 1 second while I wait for it, or it'll get in the way. Well, maybe it's not going to. All right. So let me suggest that down at the bottom on the first page, I've given you my personal things as a takeaway from the clip. There may be other things that you find that you want to capture as well. We should have sound.
Our motivations
there we
are
go.
unbelievably interesting. I mean, I find I've been working on this for a few years, and I just find the topic still so amazingly engaging and interesting. So I want to tell you about that. The science is really surprising. The science is a little bit freaky, okay? We are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think. There's a whole set of unbelievably interesting studies. I want to give you two that call into question this idea that if you reward something, you get more of the behavior you want. If you punish something, you get less of it. So let's go from London to the mean streets of Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the northeastern part of the United States. And let's talk about a study done at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Here's what they did. They took a whole group of students, and they gave them a set of challenges. Things like memorizing strings of digits, solving word puzzles, other kinds of spatial puzzles, even physical tasks like throwing a ball through a hoop. Okay, they gave them these challenges, and they said to incentivize their performance, they gave them 3 levels of rewards. Okay, so if you did pretty well, you got a small monetary reward. If you did medium well, you got a medium monetary reward. And if you did really well, if you were one of the top performers, you got a large cash prize. Okay? We've seen this movie before. This is essentially a typical motivation scheme within organizations, right? We reward the very top performers, we ignore the low performers, and the other folks kind of in the middle, okay, you get a little bit. So what happens? They do the test, they have these incentives, here's what they found out. 1, as long as the task involved only mechanical skill, bonuses worked as they would be expected. The higher the pay, the better the performance. Okay, that makes sense. But here's what happens. But once the task called for even rudimentary cognitive skill, a larger reward led to poorer performance. Now this is strange, right? A larger reward led to poorer performance? How can that possibly be? Now what's interesting about this is that these folks here who did this are all economists, 2 at MIT, 1 at the University of Chicago, 1 at Carnegie Mellon, okay? The top tier of the economics profession. And they're reaching this conclusion that seems contrary to what a lot of us learned in economics, which is that the higher the reward, the better the performance. And they're saying that once you get above rudimentary cognitive skill, it's the other way around. Which seems like this kind of, the idea that these rewards don't work that way seems vaguely left-wing and socialist, doesn't it? It's kind of this kind of weird socialist conspiracy. For those of you who have those conspiracy theories, I want to point out the notoriously left-wing socialist group that financed the research, the Federal Reserve Bank. So this is the mainstream of the mainstream coming to a conclusion that's quite surprising. It seems to defy the laws of behavioral physics. So this is strange. It's strange finding. So what do? They say, this is freaky. Let's go test it somewhere else. Maybe that $50 or $60 prize isn't sufficiently motivating for an MIT student, right? So let's go to a place where $50 is actually more significant relatively, right? So let's take the experiment. We're going to go to Madurai, India, rural India, where $50, $60, whatever the number was, is actually a significant sum of money. So they replicated the experiment in India roughly as follows. Small rewards, the equivalent of 2 weeks' salary. Small performance, low performance, 2 weeks' salary. Medium performance, about a month's salary. High performance, about 2 months' salary. Okay, so those are real good incentives. Okay, so you're going to get a different result here. Well, what happened though was that the people offered the medium reward did no better than the people offered the small reward. But this time around, the people offered the top reward. They did worst of all. Higher incentives led to worse performance. What's interesting about this is that it actually isn't all that anomalous. This has been replicated over and over and over again by psychologists, by some extent by sociologists, and by economists, over and over and over again. For simple, straightforward tasks, those kinds of incentives, if you do this, then you get that, they're great. For tasks that are algorithmic, set of rules where you have to just follow along and get a right answer, if-then rewards, carrots and sticks, outstanding. But when the task gets more complicated, when it requires some conceptual, creative thinking, those kinds of motivators demonstrably don't work. In fact, money is a motivator at work, but in a slightly strange way. If you don't pay people enough, they won't be motivated. What's curious about, there's another paradox here, which is that the best use of money as a motivator is to pay people enough to take the issue of money off the table. Pay people enough so that they're not thinking about money and they're thinking about the work. Now, once you do that, it turns out there are 3 factors that the science shows lead to better performance. Not to mention personal satisfaction. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy is our desire to be self-directed, to direct our own lives. Now, in many ways, traditional notions of management run afoul of that. Management is great if you want compliance, but if you want engagement, which is what we want in the workforce today as people are doing more complicated, sophisticated things, self-direction is better. Let me give you some examples of this, of almost radical forms of self-direction in the workplace that lead to good results. Let's start with this company right here, Atlassian, an Australian company. It's a software company, and they do something really cool. Once a quarter, on a Thursday afternoon, they say to their developers, for the next 24 hours, you can work on anything you want. You can work on it the way you want. You can work on it with whomever you want. All we ask is that you show the results to the company at the end of those 24 hours in this fun kind of meeting, not a star chamber session, but this fun meeting with beer and cake and fun and other things like that. It turns out that that one day of pure, undiluted autonomy has led to a whole array of fixes for existing software, a whole array of ideas for new products that otherwise had never emerged. One day. Now, this is not an if-then incentive. This is not the sort of thing that I would have done 3 years ago before I knew this research. I would have said, you want people to be creative and innovative? Give them a freaking innovation bonus. If you do something cool, I'll give you $2,500. They're not doing this at all. They're essentially saying, you probably want to do something interesting. Let me just get out of your way. One day of autonomy produces things that had never emerged. Now, let's talk about mastery. Mastery is our urge to get better at stuff. We like to get better at stuff. This is why people play musical instruments on the weekend. You have all these people who are acting in ways that seem irrational economically. They play musical instruments on weekends. Why? It's not going to get them a mate. It's not going to make them any money. Why are they doing it? Because it's fun, because you get better at it, and that's satisfying. Go back in time a little bit. I imagine this if I went to my first economics professor, a woman named Mary Alice Schulman, and I went to her in 1983 and said, Professor Schulman, can I talk to you after class for a moment? Yeah. I got this inkling. I got this idea for a business model. I just want to run it past you. Here's how it would work. You get a bunch of people around the world who are doing highly skilled work, but they're willing to do it for free and volunteer their time, 20, sometimes 30 hours a week. Okay, she's looking at you somewhat skeptically there. Oh, but I'm not done. And then what they create, they give it away rather than sell it. It's going to be huge. I mean, she truly would have thought I was insane. Okay, it seemed to fly in the face of so many things. But what do you have? You have Linux powering 1 out of 4 corporate servers in Fortune 500 companies, Apache powering more than the majority of web servers, Wikipedia. What's going on? Why are people doing this? Why are these people, many of whom are technically sophisticated, highly skilled people who have jobs, okay? They have jobs. They're working at jobs for pay, doing sophisticated technological work. And yet, during their limited discretionary time, they do equally, if not more, technically sophisticated work, not for their employer, but for someone else for free. That's a strange economic behavior. Economists who looked into it, why are they doing this? It's overwhelmingly clear. Challenge and mastery, along with making a contribution. That's it. What you see more and more is a rise of what you might call the purpose motive. Is that more and more organizations want to have some kind of transcendent purpose. Partly because it makes coming to work better, partly because that's the way to get better talent. And what we're seeing now is, in some ways, when the profit motive becomes unmoored from the purpose motive, bad things happen. Bad things ethically sometimes, but also bad things just like not good stuff, like crappy products, like lame services, like uninspiring places to work. That when the profit motive is paramount, or when it becomes completely unhitched from the purpose motive, it just, people don't do great things. More and more organizations are realizing this and sort of disturbing the categories between what's profit and what's purpose. And I think that actually heralds something interesting. And I think that the companies organizations that are flourishing, whether they're profit, for profit, or somewhere in between, are animated by this purpose model. Let me give you a couple of examples. Here's the founder of Skype. He says, our goal is to be disruptive, but in the cause of making the world a better place. Pretty good purpose. Here's Steve Jobs. I want to put a ding in the universe. All right? That's the kind of thing that might get you up in the morning and racing to go to work. So I think that we are purpose maximizers, not only profit maximizers. I think the science shows that we care about mastery very, very deeply. And the science shows that we want to be self-directed. And I think that the big takeaway here is that if we start treating people like people and not assuming that they're simply horses, slower, smaller, better-smelling horses, if we get past this kind of ideology of carrots and sticks and look at the science, I think we can actually build organizations and work lives that make us better off, but I also think they have the promise to make our world just a little bit better.
Okay, so on the page 2, what I've done is given you the synopsis of some of the things that he has discussed. autonomy, thank you, mastery, and purpose. Underneath that, I've listed the question, as a leader, excuse me, as a leader, how will you create an organizational environment that fosters
make a
greater
confession at the
autonomy,
outset here.
mastery, and purpose?
A little over 20
So
years
I'm
ago,
going to invite you to go
I
back
did
into
something
your
that I
small
regret.
groups and see what kinds of
Something that
things
I'm not
you
particularly proud of.
identify.
Something that in many ways I wish no one would ever know, but that here I feel kind of obliged to reveal.
Oh, yes, thank
In
you.
the late
thank you.
1980s, in a moment of youthful indiscretion, I went to law school. Now,
Okay, there's a statement on the second page, right under autonomy, mastery, and purpose, that says, how do we create an environment that fosters more of those three things? Of course. How many would you like? Okay.
Is there two handouts or just this one?
There's just one.
So on the second page, we're talking.
What you have is a combination, a synthesis of two sessions. So how about I give you the right one? Well, that'll be on Thursday. So I don't know if that feels, you're welcome to have this one. But it looks like what they've done is they've copied. Yeah. So, okay, so right here, here's the question. Okay, so I'm sorry to interrupt you. Forgive me for interrupting. Let's go ahead and discuss this. Some really good conversations in all three groups, and so I think it would be valuable if we have a general discussion. Regarding autonomy, what were the kinds of things that you identified that's going to foster greater autonomy from employees? I can shut down a group.
One thing you said in the beginning of that clip is you kind of have to get everyone comfortable and happy with what they're getting paid, so they know that they're worth something. Because if not, there always seems to be a money component there.
And it is, and I would pose, at least from my experience, that people will complain that they are not paid enough when they perceive these things are absent. That's the easiest thing to discuss. I'm reminded of Colleen Barrett, who took over as CEO of Southwest Airlines when Herb Kelleher retired, who said, if money were the primary motivator, I'd have no pilots, because we don't pay the highest in the industry. These things existed. So as Daniel Pink said, money matters, but it is not the primary motivator. But you're right. If I perceive that I am not being paid, that demonstrates that I am worth something to the organization, I get high-centered there, don't I? Thank you. What other things regarding autonomy did you discuss? Please.
We discussed relationships again.
Okay.
A relationship that's good enough with an individual to recognize what it is that will help them to accomplish the other objective. So if you know them well enough to know how they may, what might motivate them, or how they can be successful.
Okay, so what matters to them? Thank you. What else did you, under autonomy? Please.
We said, since we're UDOT, we'll say that we set the guardrails, we kind of have those guidelines, and then we just let them operate within those. That sounds better.
Yes, if I understand what the parameters are, yes, if I understand what the parameters are, I may do it differently than you would do it, but here's the boundaries: on time, on budget, whatever those are. Then you let me go, which means you have to make sure that we've established the guardrails. Otherwise, I may think I know how to do it, and you're thinking you're wandering off into the weeds. Very good. I think I saw another hand over here. I was just hallucinating.
Goes back to matters to me. It's understanding their motivation. So, quality of life is something as a governmental agency that we can maybe provide where compensation's out of our hands, but we have the ability to provide a quality of life, be flexible, so that they can deal with family-related issues. Give them an overall goal or vision, and allow them to take and put their own spin on that vision.
So if I know what the potential is, I know what the goal is, and I understand the context, and I have the guardrails, I got it. Let me go. And there's a sense that I get to have some ownership of my quality of life. Thank you. What about mastery? How do we foster mastery? What does that environment look like? How does it build on what we've already said? Let's come over to this group. Wow, what did you hone for mastery?
He mentioned ownership. If you give somebody ownership in a project or something like that, they're going to want to succeed. And you tell them, and you have to have communicated with, done all the other stuff before, so that they know what the vision and goal and all that stuff is, they know the parameters, but when you give it to them and let them have it.
And you get out of the way, don't you? And ooh, if they make a mistake, what is your role as the leader? To have created that relationship that the first place they want to come is to you. And it also means that you are connecting with them frequently. How's it going? Any barriers? What do you need from me in order to be successful? And by the way, how's the plumbing problem at home? Okay, anything else with mastery?
Oh, I'm like, I felt that above my head. I think. We have to work together as a team.
Okay, so we can say collaboration, which means that we understand, is the organization's culture one of silo thinking, where we're competing with each other, Or are those silos broken down and we understand we really are one system? We can talk with and work wherever we need to. In a system, remember, it is a collection of interdependent parts. The parts do different things, but all work together. What often happens in organizations is we have silo thinking, and of course we know that a silo is a large impervious structure, of course, with beautiful bay windows so the grain can look out, right? No, the focus is inward. So I may do something in the process, throw it over the wall to you, you do something to adapt it and throw it over the wall, and by the time it gets to the customer, it doesn't look a thing like what you wanted, because the silos have not broken down the walls and are collaborating and working together. So mastery comes when there is collaboration and system thinking. Okay, what about purpose? How do we expand purpose? Please.
I've kind of been holding off on this from purpose. We look at our trans techs that work in our maintenance station, and their level of pride and ownership that they have in snow removal. And we talk to them, these guys that are working nights, weekends, Christmas, Thanksgiving, to keep the roads clear, and you ask them, why are you willing to do this? Because compensation's not great. But they boil down to, we are focused in keeping roads clear because it affects our family's safety, our neighbors' safety, and it directly impacts the people that we care and want to ensure a quality experience.
So we identify not with moving the snow, but ensuring safety, quality of life for something that is of larger value to me. And you do such an amazing job of moving the snow. I just learned the hard way to stay back. Okay. Stay back, yes. Give them the road, okay? Okay, so we've discussed then a lot of things about creating this environment of leadership. We've looked at the characteristics. We've looked at what motivates us in order to take that ownership. If you are the leaders who foster that kind of environment, get out of the way, because amazing things happen. And you're already doing some of those things, because as Liz mentioned, I've had the honor of working with various of you in UDOT for about 8 years now, and very impressed with the amazing things that you do. I even have a colleague in Seattle who came down and we worked on a project and said to those with whom we are working, could I take you back to Washington? Not that WADOT doesn't do a good job, but she was so impressed with the caliber of what you do. And can you only continue to grow and be better? Yes, unfortunately, we the citizens are so spoiled by what you do, we expect more. Okay, so you should have some information that talks about the 8 core beliefs of extraordinary bosses. And so there are these 8 elements, and the resource, the handout is yours for your own use as you wish. But let's walk through the 8 just very briefly. We won't go into the difference between the average and the extraordinary boss because you have the resource. Look at it that the organization is an ecosystem, not a battlefield. We are here to work together to accomplish a common purpose. So the question that I ask you is, does the environment in which you work and the one that you lead foster this sense of ecosystem that we are all in this together? Secondly, the organization is a community, not a machine. How does the organization come together frequently across functions to see how we can work more effectively together? 3, leadership is about service, not about control, as we've already identified so nicely. Number 4, my employees are my peers, not my children. And this goes back to that concept of constructive feedback. If I am perceiving how the feedback is coming to me as a parent-child dynamic, you've shut me down, okay? Number 5, motivation comes from vision, not from fear. Fear leads to movement, not to motivation. I will move where I need to get out of the way of the pain. Number 6, change equals growth, not pain. So that voice that we have talked about in involving folks in the changes that are coming, give them a sense that they can succeed rather than be set up to fail. Number 7, technology offers empowerment, not motivation. The reason for the technology is to make our lives better and make us more effective, not to make it more difficult, even though I think some of the things with technology, we have to work out the bugs. And number 8, work should be fun, not toil. And so I take you back to what you just talked about those wonderful folks who remove the snow. Because they are so vested in that higher value, look at the amazing things that they have done. Fun doesn't have to mean that we're laughing all the time, but rather we feel engaged in the purpose for which we come to work. Leadership, let me end by asking this question. How many of you enjoy being managed? How many will follow a leader that you believe in and trust? And I hope that the brief time that we've had together has given you some ideas, not that any of them are original, but ideas on which to build so that your leadership capabilities can foster even greater influence in UDOT and throughout the state. Thank you for your time, and I'll look forward to our paths crossing again. Take care.